You join us in beautiful Himachal Pradesh and we're here to ride a very exciting motorcycle. This is the new generation Triumph Tiger 1200 and it's completely new. There is no resemblance to the older motorcycle. There are two models that we have here to ride today. I've been spending the morning on this one. This is the Tiger 1200 Rally Pro. It's the off-road bike and that's why it looks so dirty. We've had a good time. Triumph has brought a total of 4 Tiger 1200s to India. We rode the more road-biased Tiger 1200 GT Pro later that day, so you will get to hear about it further in this review. The other two bikes are the Tiger 1200 Rally Explorer and the Tiger 1200 GT Explorer. Both the Explorer models get a bigger 30-litre fuel tank and a few more features, including a radar-assisted blind spot warning system, but we didn't get to ride those bikes this time around. Now before we go any further, we've been riding in nice tight forest trails where the camera hasn't really been able to follow us for most of it. So you're going to hear a lot from me about how this bike feels to ride, and we're going to skip many of the specifications because that information is out on the internet already. What you want to know is that this is new from the grounds up, and that means everything is new. The chassis, the engine, the way the shaft drive is designed, everything is different, and the big idea here was to lose weight. Triumph has done that in many ways. The chassis is lighter, the fuel tank is now aluminium. It doesn't have a single-sided swing arm anymore, but they now have a dual-sided swing arm that has helped save 1.5 kilos. In total, the new Tiger 1200 is as much as 25 kilos lighter than its predecessor, depending on the model. This Rally Pro weighs 249 kilos, which makes it exactly the same as a similarly spec'd BMW R1250 GS Pro, which is exactly the competition that Triumph is going after. But this is still a big and heavy motorcycle. It's tall as well. Seat height is 875 mm on this model, and you can raise that to 890 if you like. This is one of the few motorcycles that I actually find a little tall, and when it's on the main stand, I'm on my tiptoes. Nevertheless, when it's down there, the bike feels quite easy to manage. We've got riders here 5'6", 5'7". They are on their tiptoes, but they're getting along with the motorcycle. In fact, the new Tiger's seat height is actually a little higher than the old model, but Triumph says that this is offset by a slimmer section on the new bike where the rider's legs would extend to meet the ground. Now let's get into what you really want to know about the chassis. It's a new trellis frame, lighter like I said, new Showa suspension, and this bike has electronic suspension as standard on all the models, and I think it's the only bike in the segment that does that. The Rally Pro gets a little more travel than the GT Pro, so this has 220 mm at both ends and it's fully electronically adjustable. Triumph has kept the adjustments simple, so you don't have compression and rebound and confusing things. You just go from soft to sporty and hard. There's an interesting thing going on at the rear because this suspension also automatically adjusts the spring preload. Essentially, the rear shock can recognize whether you're riding solo or with a pillion or with luggage, and it adjusts the preload in real time, which is a very convenient and clever feature. In fact, there is so much electronic stuff going on this motorcycle that you will see wires everywhere. Lots of wires coming out of the switchgear, wires coming out of the suspension, wires all over the place. But the quality and the attention to detail and the finish is typically what you'd expect from a Triumph motorcycle. It's good. This bike is really very well equipped. You have the usual adventure bike luxuries like cruise control, heated grips, but you also have a keyless start system, and that includes the fuel filler cap as well. My favorite thing though is this beautiful 7-inch TFT display. The display takes quite a while to boot up though, and we counted just over 10 seconds before it was fully loaded. But when it is ready, this is a really good looking screen with some cool animations. That being said, it's a little confusing to use and you cannot view basic trip data unless you go into the settings menu to find it. The fuel gauge also takes a while to respond when the 20-litre fuel tank has been filled with petrol. I also find that when you stall the bike off-road, it takes a little bit of time to restart. So it's a little slow responding, but it's very pretty and it's really nice to look at. What most certainly isn't slow to respond though is this Tiger's brand new engine. Another big change happening here is what Triumph has done with the engine. Now the base bore and stroke dimensions are the same as the new Speed Triple, but that's where the similarities end. This motor has the same T-plane crankshaft setup that we first saw on the Tiger 900, and that's completely changed the character of the engine. Basically what it's done is it's changed the firing order of the cylinders, which used to be 1, 2, 3, it's now 1, 3, 2. That's changed the sound of the engine, the feel of the engine, and the character of the engine. Let me show you what it sounds like. It's almost like a twin-cylinder engine, and it behaves that way on the road as well. There's a solid mid-range push, and you know, this is an engine that many people won't really like at the first experience, especially if they love the old Tiger that sounded like a sports bike. But believe me, this is an engine that really grows on you. I'm very fond of the Tiger 900 motor today. I wasn't so fond of it the first time I rode it. Because we exclusively rode this bike in the mountains around Shimla and Narkanda, the bike never really ventured much beyond third gear. Nevertheless, it feels properly quick, as you would expect from a 150 horsepower motorcycle. The fueling itself is quite smooth, but we did notice that there's a lag followed by a slight jerk when you open the throttle. It almost feels like the bike is running a loose chain, but this is actually the drive shaft system engaging when you open the throttle, and it's occasionally accompanied by an audible clunking sound. A smoother drive shaft action would have certainly been nice, but on the upside, this system performs really well off-road, with noticeably less clatter than you would get from its primary shaft-driven rival from BMW. On the plus side, the 6-speed gearbox is slick and the bike has an outstanding up and down quick shifter. It also has a superb set of brakes that are powerful on the road but easy to modulate off it. As you'd expect, there's a vast array of electronic rider aids, including tunable riding modes and hill hold. But in typical Triumph fashion, the traction control system can be too intrusive, especially over broken roads, and the system is best turned fully off when riding off-road. As for engine heat, this is a large and powerful motor, so there's bound to be plenty. But there are a couple of things that should work in the big Tiger's favor. So like with the Tiger 900, Triumph has completely changed the way the radiator is installed. The original Tiger 800 and the 1200 had a radiator sitting in the front. This bike has split that into two side-mounted units. There are quite a few advantages to this. The first is that it lets Triumph mount the engine further forward, which they say helps the feeling of balance and ease of riding at very low speeds. Another thing I like is that when you're riding in really sticky mud, the filth getting flung off the tire does not go and deposit itself on the radiator and jam that up. It never gets clogged. On the Tiger 900, what we noticed is that hot air coming out of the radiator can hit your knee, and that gets pretty uncomfortable. Triumph seems to have noticed this as well, because this bike has a really big deflector out here that blows the air out. Now today's weather is lovely, it's not gone above 24 degrees, so I can't tell you how hot this engine gets. That will have to wait for when we get this bike back in Mumbai and spend a lot more time with it. Clearly, heat was the last thing on our minds up in the mountains, but what about the rest of the bike when it comes to sheer comfort? This is an adventure bike, so long distance comfort is paramount, and this is a very comfortable bike that doesn't come as a surprise. Riding position is upright, quite neutral, slightly rear set feet, very wide handlebar. It's comfortable, you can sit all day. You've got an adjustable windscreen. It's a similar one-hand setup from the Tiger 660, and like with that bike, I don't think it's very easy to use. I can't talk about how the aerodynamics are because we really haven't done many high speeds today. So that will also have to wait till we get the bike back home. But overall, really comfortable. As for standing up, again, quite comfortable. The bike feels wide because this is a 3-cylinder engine. I think the handlebar is a little low for someone as tall as I am, but most of the riders out here really liked it. Another thing I noticed is that your lower body is quite low, and when you're trying to hold on to the bike, I find this a little hard to do. I'd probably want to put some sort of sticky tape out here. Shorter riders find this to be a grippy surface, but I'm sort of holding on out here. Triumph has definitely put in a huge amount of work into completely redeveloping this motorcycle, and the results show. The riding experience is completely different from the old Tiger Explorer. That bike demanded a lot more effort from its rider, and it only truly rewarded you if you were willing to put in the work. This one feels far easier on its feet and far more capable. Let's start with the road. Out on these winding roads around Shimla, the steering felt surprisingly agile for something that is this big and heavy. Left to right transitions take less effort than you might expect. But off-road, that's where this thing is really impressive. The Shore suspension does an amazing job. It eats through rocky, broken, rutted roads, and you can really carry a lot of speed through without the bike getting upset. We tried our best to bottom it out today. It didn't happen. It's just stable and communicative. 21-inch front wheel, 18-inch rear wheel, these are off-road bike sizes, and the bike feels very capable off-road. The Tiger 1200 can hammer through off-road sections at a pretty high pace. but it takes a bit of caution at very low speeds because this engine can stall a little easily. I recently had the opportunity to ride its chief rival, the BMW R1250 GS, and that bike feels easier to ride at low speeds thanks to its incredible balance, light clutch and effortless steering. But the Tiger 1200 suspension feels like it's on another level when it comes to riding aggressively at high speeds over rocky trails. So that's what the Tiger 1200 Rally Pro has been like, and this is a deeply impressive motorcycle, easily up there with the best in the segment. But now we're going to get off this motorcycle and onto the road-biased GT Pro. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to call the GT Pro the slightly more road-biased sibling, because this bike still has a lot of adventure bike capability in its DNA. This bike is the Tiger 1200 GT, and at first glance it looks very similar to the Rally that we've been riding all morning, and that's because it effectively is. The chassis is the same, the engine is the same, and so is the bodywork. However, there are a few key differences. First of all, you've probably noticed that it's running on alloy wheels. This time around it's a 19-inch front while the rear remains an 18-inch unit. The bike also has different tyres. These are Metzeler Torances, whereas the Rally is on Karoo streets. It's also a wider front tyre. However, the suspension travel on this bike is a little bit lower. It's now 200 mm at both ends, which is still quite a lot. Now, because there's less suspension travel and a smaller front wheel, the seat height has come down. It's now at 850 mm, and that crucial 25 mm difference could mean quite a bit for a few people. Other changes compared to the Rally include the fact that this bike does not get an engine bash guard or the tubular engine protectors as standard. Both bikes you've seen today have Triumph's accessory LED indicators installed, and the big tubular fuel tank guards are also an optional extra. While we're on the subject of design, it should be said that this is a fresh looking motorcycle, and the new headlamp makes the Tiger 1200 look noticeably different to the Tiger 900. I also love how slim and tucked in the exhaust pipe is. This not only adds to a sense of compactness and lightness, but it will also help with mounting luggage. From the rider's point of view, everything is very similar, and that's because you interact with the bike in mostly the same way. The riding position feels the same, the screen is the same, it really hasn't changed very much. The riding experience, however, though, is a little bit different. This motorcycle feels more conventional. On the Rally, it feels like it has a 21-inch front wheel. There is a certain feeling to a bike that has a big, skinny front tyre. The Rally handles itself very well considering how slim its tyre is, but this is even better. It feels more conventional, it's got a wide front tyre, so it feels more like a normal road sports touring sort of motorcycle. When it comes to bad roads, the Rally absolutely creams its way through them. And this one is almost as good, but not quite as good, and that's probably because it just doesn't have that same 220 mm of suspension travel. Nevertheless, this is still a supremely comfortable motorcycle on any sort of terrain, and if you want to take it off-road, it has the ground clearance and the suspension travel. It will go pretty much anywhere a Rally can, but just without as much confidence, aggression and ability. It's been a long day with plenty of riding, first on the Tiger 1200 Rally Pro and now on this 1200 GT Pro. And throughout the day, both motorcycles have proved to be endlessly impressive. First of all, they're a huge step up from their predecessor, which doesn't really come as a surprise given how much Triumph has changed. But what is more interesting to me is that these bikes seem to be good enough to be considered right up there at the top of their game. If you're in the market for a full-size adventure bike, you should seriously consider the new Tiger 1200. And that's not just because it's such a nice motorcycle, but also because Triumph has priced it quite well. With a starting price of 19.2 lakh rupees for the GT Pro and 20.2 lakh rupees for the Rally Pro, these bikes slot below their equivalent rivals, and they come fully feature loaded out of the box, which isn't the same story with some of the competition. These new Tigers are definitely going to make an impact.